Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into this session today on advancing financial inclusion while facing also growing climate risks. My name is Sylvia Bauer-Jasbeck, and I work in a team at CGAP that focuses on the role of financial services in supporting climate adaptation and resilience of the most vulnerable populations, and especially of women. I'm here today with Andrée, the President and CEO of Finca International and Finca Impact Finance. Welcome, Andrée.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm so glad to be here.
So we are here today to talk about climate risk from a financial service provider's perspective. And that is because the world is at a pivotal moment when it comes to climate change. This summer, we recorded record highs of temperatures, both on land and in the oceans. And we're experiencing droughts, storms, floodings, and other climate shocks across the world with unprecedented frequency and intensity. And this has major implications for the financial sector, not least by driving up the risk of negative impact on customers, as well on financial institutions. And this is in three ways. First of all, climate change poses a direct physical risk to business continuity because natural disasters can disrupt operations, they can damage physical assets, they can threaten staff safety, for example. Also, climate change poses indirect risks to portfolio quality because clients face an increasingly volatile and unpredictable climate that could wipe out their incomes and their assets. And third, it poses transition risks as the economy is changing, and with it, consumer preferences, investor priorities, and there can be regulatory changes. And each one of those risks poses a direct threat to financial inclusion and to the wider global development goals that we care about. Because operational disruptions to a business, to a financial service provider, can mean that a client can't reliably access her savings or other financial services when she most needs them. Portfolio quality concerns can make financial institutions actually back away from certain geographic areas or from certain customer segments or certain value chains. And regulatory requirements can make it even more difficult or more expensive to serve small, semi-formal, and difficult to reach customers. And if all of this happens as a result of climate change, then we will be failing the poor and the vulnerable, not only in terms of helping them with climate change, but also when it comes to financial inclusion. So what I want to say is that climate change is threatening to push financial inclusion back. Last year, our team at CGAP has explored how the financial sector is currently thinking about and addressing climate change, and especially climate adaptation. And the findings are quite striking, and they show that there are clear risks for our sector, but there are also great opportunities. And I would highly recommend you to watch our on-demand video that summarizes the findings from that research, which you can find here on the Financial Inclusion Week's platform. What I want to stress today is that from our 100+ conversations with financial service providers, we learned that many of them care about climate change, but the focus is on the institution's resilience. Customers' resilience to climate risk is seen mainly as a portfolio quality issue. And so then the reaction tends to be, well, you need to stop serving those that are most exposed to climate risks. There are only a handful that are seeing an opportunity to continue serving climate vulnerable customers and to help them adapt and become more resilient through targeted product and service offerings. And one of these is Finca Impact Finance. And I'm very excited to talk today with Andrée about their experience in managing climate risks while also continuing to pursue the mission of including the financially excluded populations. So over to you, Andrée. Let's maybe start first with a brief introduction to Finca International and Finca Impact Finance, which is your global network of microfinance institutions. So over to you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Well, before I do that, I do want to thank my colleagues at CGAP for your thought leadership. It's so important to the future of financial inclusion. So thank you. And thanks for having me here today. So Finca was founded almost 40 years ago. It was focused on financial inclusion. The premise was that small amounts of capital could be loaned to those who were financially marginalized. They would invest that in their small businesses and then in turn invest in their families and take themselves towards prosperity. What we and many, many others have learned over the last 40 years is number one, that financial inclusion is frequently not enough, that there are a number of other factors that impact resilience, and that we need to invest, and Finca has been investing in other social impact initiatives that are designed to drive resilience, focus primarily on water, sanitation, health, green energy, et cetera. But also, we really have to be much more attentive to understanding what customers are experiencing and what they need, and holding ourselves accountable to delivering on that. Our vision as we go forward is to combine our research capability with our investment capability, and as you said, this large international network that we have, to partner with other institutions to develop scalable and sustainable solutions. And a big part of that clearly has to be around climate adaptation. So I'm very excited to talk about that today.
Thank you, Andrée. And how has climate, you just mentioned climate adaptation as a key topic for that, but how has that experience been that climate actually became such an important topic for Finca and for your operations? Can you talk a little bit more about how you see climate within your business?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it a little bit more in terms of the research that we've done later. But when you look across the geographies that we operate in, our clients are exposed to higher than average climate-related disasters. And we've seen that over many years, that we are experiencing floods, that we experience hurricanes. And because 40% of our portfolio is in rural areas, we skew heavily towards agriculture and agriculture adjacent activities. And those are the ones that clearly are the most impacted by climate and climate change. In particular, because the group of clients that we aim to serve is really among the vulnerable poor. They have fewer resources at their disposal once they are experiencing this kind of disaster to be able to recover. They have limited savings, they have limited assets. We saw during the COVID pandemic that whatever resources they did have were wiped out. And so that's clearly become an increasing focus for us as an organization. In addition to that, it's not just the agricultural clients that we've seen affected, because the infrastructure systems are also frequently limited in the countries that we work in. When there are floods and disasters, even the urban areas like in Congo with the recent flooding can be seriously affected, and clients can't work in their businesses, or their businesses are just destroyed. And we have a strong focus on gender, which has helped us to see that, yes, in fact, women are disproportionately affected by climate-related issues, principally because they have largely informal businesses, and again, their resilience tends to be lower. So it's become increasingly important for us as an organization, not just because of the social impact that we want to generate, but also to try and mitigate that financial vulnerability from large climate events like floods and hurricanes. We had the flood in Pakistan that impacted over 30 million people, including thousands of Finca's clients. Supporting them in turn supports us as an organization. And we know that as we go forward, that's likely to become even more exacerbated. So it's important to be intentional and think ahead.
And you mentioned that you did a little bit of research into understanding better the exposure and vulnerability of your customers to climate change. So what did you find?
Yeah, so First, I want to say that, Finca is at the beginning of its understanding of the climate journey. But we have been able to leverage the really strong research capabilities that we have internally. So the first thing that we did was actually conduct a longitudinal survey to look at what our exposure was across the countries that we operate in. As I said before, maybe not surprisingly, most of them are above average or very high in terms of their climate exposure. We then took that and worked with our teams in each of the countries to try and quantify what that risk really looked like for us as an institution. But then this year, we went a step further. We wanted to understand what it looked like from our customers' perspective. So we started with a relatively simple set of questions. We surveyed 2,500 customers around the world, and we asked them, what their experience was, whether they'd heard about climate change. First of all, maybe not surprisingly, less than half of them had actually heard about climate change. But of those who had heard about it, the majority of them not only were very concerned about its implications for them personally, but also a majority of them said that they had been negatively impacted in their ability to generate an income over the last 10 years by changes in climate. Obviously, that's kind of just opening the shell of all of the things that we want to understand better. The next step for us is now to drill down into each of the countries where we work and understand what are the different types of effects that people are experiencing, and what kinds of solutions will help them to become more resilient.
No. And knowing all that, you did not decide that you will not work with those clients anymore, as I understand. So you actually are turning to them and looking into solutions to help them adapt and better manage the risks that they are exposed to. So can you share a little bit more what you're doing to help them?
Yeah. So the first and most important thing, I think, is really that research and understanding exactly what the primary concerns are that customers have. But also, I think I can say this, that collectively, as a sector, we haven't done enough to design solutions that clients actually want and need. So there is an education component that we are going to invest in around helping our customers to better understand what risks they are facing in the future. Connecting those customers is crucially important. So Finca has invested heavily in digitizing and automating as much as we can. But we believe that still it's that face-to-face interaction with clients that remains crucial, particularly given the client base that we aim to serve. But we've got to get them connected to information and to education. And so onboarding them into the digital economy is a key pillar of what we are undertaking. From that, then, we know that in addition to financial inclusion, which is obviously key, we do have to have other solutions that we can offer to customers. Clearly, we can finance things like infrastructure improvements. We can work on disaster preparedness. We can finance more energy efficient technologies. And those are all things that Finca can deliver directly through its microfinance network. But in addition to that, because we have this global network, we are looking for partners that want to work with us to test and innovate scalable and sustainable global solutions that we can offer to our customers. And I think that ability to both connect with customers and test with them, but also to partner with large-scale organizations that have that same vision is one thing that's going to help us to really make some substantial changes to the landscape that we see today, where, frankly, there are not a lot of wide-scale, large-scale solutions that are effective. And I know that you saw that in your research, and it's something that certainly resonates with me and a lot of the other colleagues in the industry that I've been talking with.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, like we see very few financial service providers that are actually already really thinking about what type of solutions can they develop and create and how can they help their customers. And I wonder, because you mentioned quite a few things like education, also bringing in partners that provide additional non-financial services that really help them to better understand their exposure and also ways to adapt and to become more resilient. Now, this sounds like it's a lot of additional work, and this is costly, right? So and already as a microfinance institution, it's very hard to keep your costs down and to continue offering affordable financial services. So I wonder, what's the driver, what's the motivation to do all that, despite that very costly undertaking that it takes to support your customers on this journey?
Yeah, and that's a fair question. So, first of all, we are a social impact organization, and we do firmly believe that unless we bring those who are financially marginalized into the formal economy and help them to be successful, there's a long-term cost down the road. I think actually, climate change is very much the same. It's just at a much more impactful and massive scale with respect to the world. 100% of zero is still zero. And so while there's a cost attached to thinking about what the interventions are that we need, and a cost attached to delivering the innovation necessary to design the right solutions, I hope that we can all agree that if we don't make that investment, the longer term cost to us is significantly greater. And so for us as an organization, it really is about taking that long view and a proactive approach to climate. But also, I think that Finca does have a leadership role to play in terms of information. And, because we have this international network and because we have this fantastic research function, we can actually share a lot about what we are learning. And I think that to be effective in addressing the kinds of risks that we're talking about, it's going to require a lot of openness, and it's going to require a lot of collaboration. I've heard that through all of the Financial Inclusion Week discussions so far, so I know everyone is thinking about it. It's more than just small partnerships in countries where we're testing, which is definitely the first phase. But it has to be at a much more broad scale level. And that means that we've got to collaborate with our partners who have the resources and knowledge that we don't, to come together and leverage everything that we've got in order to deliver the answer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's also been one of the takeaways of our research. And then also I'm glad to hear that willingness to collaborate, and I hope to see more collaboration moving forward, especially on this topic. I would like to talk now a little bit more concretely about what type of actions and what type of products have you designed to help your customers adapt to climate change. Before we dive into that, I just want to mention and share with the audience that whilst we're looking for climate responsive or climate supportive financial services, we realize there's not a clear definition of such. And so we did actually come up with a taxonomy that might be useful for some people in the audience. And my colleague will share the link to that in the chat. And we did find that existing products that are designed to support customers in their climate adaptation journeys are primarily insurance products, and the majority of them focus on rural regions. And we actually found that there are almost no products that were designed with an intentional consideration of gender. So, sorry, at Finca, you focus mostly on lending products, if I understand correctly. And you do have an intentional focus also on women. And you mentioned also before that you have been looking also specifically at your female clients' exposure. So I was just wondering, Awal, can you share with us maybe an example of how you've launched a climate resilience product?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you, Sylvia, since my technology is so wonky, to get ready with the video. Sylvia's been kind enough to help me out here. So we have an institution in Tajikistan where we have recently piloted a climate smart lending product that started in 2022. So I'll tell you a little bit about it, but then I think the best thing is actually to watch the video, because it's always better to hear directly from the voice of the customer. So Sylvia's got this teed up. The product was initially supported by a low interest loan that we got from a South Korean NGO called Good Neighbors. They made it possible to invest in this pilot. It's a climate resilient lending product. I'll note, and I'm going to say this again because I think it's crucially important, that I think part of the reason that this product has worked so well is that it actually gives the customers a lot of flexibility in choosing what works for them within a range of options. And that's, you know, that flexibility is something that we do well to incorporate, I think, in a lot of other activities related to financial inclusion. We did review the product with the central bank and the regulator before launching, and I know we'll talk a little bit about why that's important later on, but I think that, you know, making sure that all of your stakeholders are aware of what you're intending to do really helps to smooth the way when you do potentially have questions and or problems later down the road. As of today, we have dispersed almost $1 million. So it's a relatively small pilot. It's been about 380 loans. The current outstanding portfolio is just under $500,000. As I said, those clients have used the funding for a variety of adaptations, including drip irrigation, greenhouses, which we're going to see, energy efficient equipment, which is great. Notably, and I think of critical importance to institutions that are focused on financial sustainability, the demand has been very high, the performance has been very good, and the portfolio quality has been better, than that of other standard products. So if we can go ahead and show the video, this is one of our customers. He's been with us since 2014, and I think it'll tell us a little bit about it, and then I can come back and kind of recap.
Wonderful. I hope my screen can be seen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, sorry.
جمهوری تاجیکستان اویلادور صاحب 6 فرزند معلوماتی عالی نوپورا در ساحه خوجگی زمینداری کار و فعالیت میکنم. من از سال 2012 با بانک فینکا کار و فعالیت میکنم. من سالهای طولانی باز در خوجگی قشلاق کار و فعالیت میکنم. با زمین ناز آشناام که با محصولات پولیزی یعنی که کشاورزی سر و کار دارم، پامیدور، بودرینگ، محصولاتی که با من شناس است، من با او کار کرده میتونم. از روی نظرداشت خودم به شما معلوم می‌کنم که هر سال از آفت‌های طبیعی یعنی که باران‌های طولانی، جولا، خنکی‌هایی که پای در پای می‌آیند که ما رو وادار می‌سازد که یعنی که سری وقت پیش آنها رو بعضا وقت گرفتن نمی‌توانیم. یعنی که مثل کارکردی که ما میکنیم که اون رستنی‌هایی که پرورش خودی در گرمخانه پرورش کرده میاریم و میکوریم، میشود که در یک روز به تلف میآیند. مبلغ قرضی که من در سال سپری گشته گرفتم، یعنی که با مقدار 25,000 سومانی، یعنی با فایزی پست 22.8 یا 23 انیقترش در روی کاغذ نوشته شده است. یعنی که برای انکشاف دادن گرمخانه خود که در نزد حولگی قرار دادم، با اون خراجات کردم و با زمین خوجگی دیخانی که برای کشت و کار بهارانه تیاری دیده ایستادم و برای کارکرد زمین خریدن تخم‌های сифатнок барои техникаҳои коркарди замин онро сафарбар карда истодаам. пуле ки ман аз банк гирифтам барои худи зиндагии ман, яъне кӯмаки ҳам молӣ ва ҳам моддӣ, ҳам таъмини оилаи худ ки ман соҳиби 6 фарзанд ҳастам, барои таъминоти худи рӯзгори худ ва барои тиҷорат ҳам ба ман кӯмаки ҷиддӣ мерасонад. яъне ки маҳсулоте ки ман аз замин мегирам пешниҳоди ҳам худи ҳамсояҳо ва ҳам худи бозор гардонида метавонам. яъне ки беҳбудии зиндагии ман аз рӯи пули гирифтам ин соли тӯлонист, ман аз ин ягон ноқаноатмандӣ карда наметавонам. яъне ки барои зиндагии ман хело маро дастгирӣ мекунад. фаҳмиши кофӣ гуфтанро ман пурра 100% гуфта наметавонам ки ман дар соли омад, яъне ки дар соли пешомад агар маҳсулоти худро бо харҷи калон ҳам сарфа кунаму онро яъне ки кишту кор кунаму ба аз офатҳои табиӣ эмин доштани худро ягон кафолат дода наметавонам. вақте ки зироати мо талаф меёбад, мехостанд ки моро дастгирӣ мекардаанд.
Thanks, Sylvia. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's always important to put a face to the work that we do, and ultimately, you know, I think that one of the things that we really want to make sure we're leveraging is that voice that our customers have in product design. And Sylvia, you know, I think that gets us to kind of some of the obstacles or focus areas that we need to address as we go forward. You know, we need to make sure that what we are delivering is something that customers actually want. And so it needs to be simple, something that they can use and that they understand. But also it needs to be financially accessible to them. And clearly one of the key ingredients in the success of this particular pilot was the fact that the cost of funds was a bit lower. That helped to create an incentive also for customers to engage in those kinds of activities. I know that we know that incentivizing helps to ease energy transitions globally. And so we're very much looking to achieve the same kinds of solutions, but ones that are truly value add for the customers that we're trying to help. We need to make sure that there is a wider range of potential products that we can offer to customers, because yes, drip irrigation, solar irrigation, solar home systems, all of those things are important and useful, but we're going to need to, in my view at least, test and innovate more in agricultural interventions that are going to help with crop replacement, et cetera, et cetera. And that means also helping to make sure that clients can take a longer view, because they are very dependent on immediate income. And so, you know, if they are going to take a longer view and make some investments that don't pay off in the immediate term, then again, I think there's a role for subsidy in order to help encourage them and get the uptake of those types of changes moving.
Thank you so much, Andrée. And I realize we are reaching the end of the conversation. And maybe to end that conversation, I would like to just hear from you. What are your maybe top 3 recommendations for other financial service providers that seek to be smarter and more proactive about their customers' climate resilience?
Thanks, Sylvia. So number 1, you know, definitely invest in understanding where your customers are and understanding the landscape that you are operating in. Number 2, really invest in partnerships As I said, I hope really strongly in the middle of this presentation, this is not a place where we will be successful if we go it alone. And there are so many institutions out there that are excellent partners and want to collaborate on crafting solutions that actually help. And so that helps inform all of us. And it also helps us to move faster. Monitor and evaluate for sure. Hold yourselves accountable to generating the impact that we say we're going to generate. And then investing in, climate-related outreach, climate-focused outreach with customers to talk to them about what their experience is really crucially important.
Thank you, Andrée. And I know we didn't get time to cover the questions from the audience, but we will go into that chat and we will respond to your questions in writing. Let me maybe close now and thank you again, Andrée, for making the time today and for sharing your experience, and also thanks again to the Financial Inclusion Week organizers for inviting us and letting us organize this session. If I may summarize what my 3 takeaways are from this conversation is that you've actually invested quite a bit in internal capacity on climate change. So you also mentioned that you had to educate your staff and you really have to bring them along, right? Because they also have to understand what does climate change mean and how can it affect your customers. So I think that is a crucial point that I think needs to be considered by others. And then I also heard you looking at it not only from the risk perspective, but very much so from an opportunity perspective, which I think we all have to really appreciate, that there's an opportunity and we are all optimistic people. So we really have to leverage that power of inclusive finance to help people adapt and build resilience. So I think that is also key. And then the partnerships that we can't emphasize enough, the collaboration and the need to work across the market system with a variety of sector stakeholders to make this work. So let me end it with that. Thank you again, Andrée. Thank you for the colleagues from the Financial Inclusion Week, from CFI, for helping us out with this. And thanks for the audience for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.